My name is Leonard F. Thomas. I work as the Executive Director of Pistis Empowerment Foundation. We're headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria, and we're focused on three areas: education, health, and shelter. On the health, precisely, we have a flagship program known as the Obomi Medical and Surgical Outreach. It's pretty much an outreach that we do annually, where we cater to as much as 5,000 underserved people within a space of 1 week. And the goal is to also garner doctors and medical practitioners from across the country and sometimes from around the world within that space of 1 week. As much as 250 volunteers also serve during that week, where we do all kinds of free medical interventions, ranging from, eyeglasses dispensing, eye surgeries, dental surgeries, fibroid surgeries, all for free. Different types of ailments are taken care of, majorly around primary and secondary healthcare, right? We also see it as a way to give back to community, especially within Nigeria, because, within the last few years, we've had, an exodus of, medical practitioners in the country. So the gap is widening in that space. So there's a need. And we have, taken deliberate steps to bridge that gap by garnering medical practitioners who have a large heart and also want to contribute, to society positively. So that's on the health, largely. On the education, we have a scholarship program where we cater largely to children from primary to secondary and university, institutions. We take care of their school fees for that length of time. Over the last 4 years, we've been able to successfully sponsor about 135 kids, or majorly in primary schools, largely around the southwest and south-south aspects or regions of Nigeria. Right. And on the shelter, we recently set up a shelter for homeless children, not orphanage, but homeless street kids. It's one area that not many players, in the NGO space, venture into because it's high risk. But we've seen that, a lot of kids are growing in that space in terms of we're having a lot of street kids. And if nothing is done about this area, they become a menace to society. So we have a home where we nurture them. We cater to their food, their clothing, their academics, as well as their talent, bridging that gap, largely. So that home, of course, currently we did a pilot where we have 23 children in the home. We're scaling up in the next 5 years to have at least 100 kids, within the home. So in the next 5 years, we plan to cater to as much as 100 kids, where we want to scale the shelter and, achieve the same objective. So it's still a drop in the ocean, but we also see the need to be very strategic in our approach, where we're able to set up, a community or a shelter that also trains children who are street kids, as much as 500 within a space of 1 month, in certain skills. Because there's the need for them to be busy positively and not, be roaming the streets as you see them today in around different communities in Africa and in Lagos and Nigeria, to be precise. Coincidentally, we recently turned 5, just last month to be precise. And over the last 5 years, I've learned a lot of lessons, but I'll speak to 3. The first is the fact that there is the need to be more strategic in our approach to philanthropy, as well as solving, the problems within Africa, social problems to be precise. Africa currently has about 54 countries. Nigeria, for example, has 36 states, and the problems are growing as we progress as a continent and as a nation. So in my view, one major problem we have identified is the need to collaborate more within different spaces or industries, whether it's in the NGO space, or as some of us call it, the developmental space or the social space, whether it's in the public or private sector. There is the need for people and institutions to collaborate more. You cannot solve problems that are growing alone. The second major thing I've seen is the need to have a top-bottom approach to solving the problems. A lot of the NGOs that I see today are solving the problems from the bottom space, right? And I've come to realize that, it's, the analogy I want to give is like when you have a house that is leaking, right? And you simply just put buckets, under where it is leaking, just so that the house isn't flooded, but you don't seal where it is leaking. So there's the need to plug the leakages. And in my view, the strategy there is to engage policy, to engage, the states, to be more, involved with advocacy so that we can address the issues from the roots. So when governments are involved with social issues, the collaborating with the NGO space and the social sector helps to address issues holistically. So that's another issue that I've seen that we need to address. In the last 5 years. And lastly, another main area that I've seen where we have problems is funding, right? Across Africa, we have more countries that are classified as third world countries, right? And, we've seen over many years where the West funds a lot of, the issues that we're dealing with. But a lot of the times, those funding are not in isolation, right? Because sometimes there's a demand that are placed on countries, to also give back in one way or another to the West, right? So there's the need for African countries to be strategic, to address their issues. There's the need for us to also, collaborate across sectors when it comes to funding, right? There's the need for a lot of HNIs, a lot of philanthropists to come together to solve Africa's problems, because Africa will not change, beyond Africans. Africa is Africa because of Africans, and the changes that need to happen within Africa will come from Africa. So over the last 5 years, Pistis Foundation has been able to successfully impact lives broadly and deeply around the three areas. We're currently at the verge of building a hospital, but in the last, I'll just give a typical example. Last month, we held our BOMI outreach, which is now, like I mentioned, annual, and we're able to cater to a little close to 5,000 people, or 4,000, precisely 3,991 people within the space of 5 days, right? Where we were able to address interventions, largely around different areas I mentioned earlier. In detail, we were able to achieve 7,991 medical interventions for that number of people. And that is broad because, someone comes in to the medical intervention that was blind with both eyes and they leave seeing. Someone comes in with a lot of dental problems, they leave and that pain is relieved. There are people who came in with goiter on their neck. Sometimes people call me a doctor, Dr. Leonard to be precise. I'm not a medical practitioner, but I've had to learn the terms of that space. So we have, cases like thyroidectomies, myomectomies, different types of ailments that are treated all at no cost to the beneficiaries. And in my view, that is huge impact, because sometimes a lot of these people come in and they have nurtured these ailments for as much as 5 years to 7 years to 10 years. And I'll end with one story, right? There's a lady, her name is, and I think I can mention, a pseudonym, Nancy. She's very underserved, couldn't speak good English, she had fibroid that she had nurtured, or carried for as much as 7 years. And her case was peculiar because it had grown to 16.5 kg. Right? She had become an outcast in her society. Her husband had abandoned her. Her son was the only one that was now taking care of her. And she came in. If you see her, you probably think that she was, pregnant with twins. But by the time, she went into surgery, and this was in 2019, and she came out and, she had a huge relief. What hit me the most from her story was that after about 4 months, when we did post-op care, and we followed up with her story, we heard her saying that now she's able to bend down and wash her clothes. And a lot of the times, many of us take these things for granted. But that was something she had desired and couldn't do because of the fibroid that she had, carried for years, right? We still are in touch with her as much as, we can. We try to empower some of the people who fall into this category. She was in my office sometime last year, November to be precise. And a lot of the times they have access to me directly because what we do is largely from a place of compassion as well as passion, right? So this is just one typical story of so many other people, of the lives that, Pistis Foundation has been able to touch. Thanks to our founder, Godman Akinlabi, and, the board of trustees that I'm privileged to work with, as well as the donors who gave to support our mission. Thank you.